that we are currently live. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Her Royal Highness, Director General of IRENA, President of the Rockefeller Foundation, UK COP26 Envoy, the Deputy Director of the Netherlands Green Growth Institute, the Special Advisor to the Secretary General on Climate, and the Director of International Relations at Sustainable Energy for All. I would like to welcome you, as well as our two further guests, Sri Suresh Prabhu, in the Indian Prime Minister's G7 and G20 Sherpa, as well as Sri Chaturvedi, the Secretary of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, to this second of our ISA webinars. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so delighted that you could please join us for the second of our series of webinars, and one on such an important topic. I'd now like to hand over to the Director General of the International Solar Alliance for his welcome remarks.
Honorable Sri Suresh Prabhu, PM Surfer to the G7 and G20, the ex-Minister for Railways and Commerce. In fact, he's a friend, philosopher and guide for ISA. And I've seen him as a great philosopher. And Your Royal Highness Princess Abje Jigma, Special Envoy of the President of the Burkina Faso, Vice Minister Indusekhar Chaturvedi, the Secretary to the Federal Government of India in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, my friend Mr. Lakhammer, DG IRENA, who has been a source of inspiration to us, and of course Mr. Merton is here, the COP26 envoy. ISA and COP26 we are planning to do a lot of things together, and Mrs. Carmen, the DD Inclusive Green Growth Department of the Government of Netherlands. In fact, recently Netherlands has joined us as the additional member for the European region. ISA has 4 regions, and Mr. Rajiv sir, of course, I met him the other day, and always a good visitor of ISA. We've been trying to do a lot of things together. Mr. Selvin Charles Hart, Special Advisor to the Secretary General of the UN, and UN is our strategic partner as per the framework agreement. We have 48 partners all across UN agencies, UN and multilateral development banks, and that is where Mr. Ricardo Politi comes in. He is an old advisor of ISA. We treat him as a family of our ISA family, and Mr. Glenin Oroz, Director SE for All. In fact, when Rachel was there, we used to be, we signed, in fact, an interim partnership with this thing. Of course, I must tell Rachel is here, and we used to call her live wire. Whenever she would organize anything, it will be so lively throughout the day. Welcome all of you, and I'm not going to, because we have got some 600, 700 participants, so I would keep I won't come between you and the audiences, but as you know, COVID has created a lot of chaos. Some unseen microviruses paralyzed the whole of mankind in different ways. And specifically, if you look at solar, the equipment supply line has got disrupted. Under construction projects have got stalled. Supply chain disruption is very, common, and particularly whenever there is a lot of dependence on imports from particular regions in the world, it has got more affected. And manpower, of course, has been a big issue now. With like a country like India, I've had millions of migrant laborers have gone from one part of the country to the other. And project financing has also got into problems, and then of course those who plan for big capacities, they are on hold, and reduction in consumption of power has also created a lot of problems. It not only putting pressure on renewable, although solar has particularly not suffered that much, but it is likely to suffer. And because of it has also created financial issues for DISCOMs, the district power utilities. With this background, in fact, although the market has a lot of studies on how COVID is impacting, and the COVID's impact is changing, day by day. We decided to bring out a report through Bridge to India, and Bridge to India has been working with us for quite some time. Today, in fact, the idea is, ISA has of course come to the second level. We call it the next level. For your just information, 86 members countries, the sovereign countries, have become our signatories. 67 countries have ratified it, and 19 countries are signatories. And recently, to facilitate Germany, Spain, and Italy, and Mongolia, and Nepal, or everybody to join, we amended the framework agreement. We call it the first amendment, and it is going to come into force shortly. 26 countries have ratified the amendment. 4 more countries have to ratify. As you know, it is so difficult to administer a treaty-based organization where everything goes by Vienna Convention and procedures. We have got a very good governance structure. India president, France is co-president. We have 4 regional vice presidents. UK is the vice president for Europe and other regions, and the Netherlands is the additional member. Latin America, we have Peru, and Peru is the vice president, and Venezuela is the other member. So far as Asia Pacific is concerned, we have Tonga as the vice president, and Sri Lanka is the other member. And Africa, we have Togo as the vice president, and Niger as the other member. This is the governance structure. In fact, 6th of June 2018 is our legal date of birth for the Secretariat. So we will be completing 2 years as a legally validated under the framework agreement Secretariat. And in 2 years, we have run quite a few programs, 5 programs. And today, the relevance of this is that all those 6 programs we are running, starting from mini-grid to rooftop to, because we are an action-oriented organization, to solar parks, cooling and heating that is going to come, solar finance, mini-grids, rooftop. Now, we have put in almost $5 billion worth projects. And with this, we are trying to go to the next level, which means, we are going to operationalize these projects. As a first way, 272,000 pumps. We went for a global tender, and 22 countries are going to benefit of this. The very fact that we brought down the price by almost 40 to 50%, that is an indirect subsidy of almost more than $1 billion from ISA. Although, as of now, we are searching for program finance and are going for a research mobilization drive. And in 14th of October, we are planning for a dinner. With this brief, and this is the context why we came to see the impact, because the impact of COVID on solar and solar projects is going to affect us globally, affect our members. With this, now I leave the floor to Fiona. Please go ahead with your agenda.
Many thanks, DG. We were to be shortly joined by the Secretary of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, but it appears that they're still not yet able to join us. So we might proceed straight to our distinguished panel and then have the Secretary of the MNRE join us at the end to launch the report. On that note, I'd like to hand over to our very distinguished and very well-known moderator, Rachel Kite, the Dean of the Fletcher School at the Tufts University, to moderate today's panel.
Well, thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you very much, Director General Tripathi. It is a great honour and privilege to be with you all to moderate what I think was be a very lively debate with an extraordinary panel full of insight, but also experience born of the practice of actually trying to build and spur the solar industry over the last decade or more. And here we are at a moment where the world is truly dislocated, and some very interesting sort of initial evidence about the resilience of the solar sector at these extraordinary times, and obviously a very now lively global debate about how to make sure that we recover better from COVID and use the dislocation as an opportunity to spur an even faster, more comprehensive and inclusive energy transition. So I'm here to moderate. I'm here to move from speaker to speaker. And so it's a real privilege to be able to introduce as our first speaker, the Director General of IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, Francesco La Camera, who's been in the job a year or so now, and finds himself at the forefront of this extraordinary move towards renewable energy. And so, Francesco, you've put out some really important analysis in the last few weeks. And if you couple that with evidence coming from IEA and others that there is a resilience in the renewable energy sector, what should governments be doing? What should investors be doing? What should be the policy priorities if we're going to ensure that renewable energy is really able to spur the recovery and to come out stronger in this recovery to the virus? Over to you, sir. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Rachel. It's really a pleasure to be moderated by the lady that guided us towards the climate summit last year. Naturally, thanks for the invitation from my friends of Untitled Chapter. I'm very honored to be with you here today. As I have now many times occasion to say in the past, renewable energy investments are the future. I believe that volatility that we have seen in other parts of the energy sector will boost the attractiveness of renewables as a long-term investment based on their already strong business case. Our new cost report that will be released tomorrow shows on average that new solar PV and onshore winds cost less than keeping many existing coal plants in operation. Auction results show this trend accelerating. Just look at the India recent action around the clock renewable power supply. Naturally, the renewable energy sector has been impacted by the global pandemic like any other sector, but less. There are a number of short-term actions for governments to take to provide relief. One example may include for revisiting deadline for renewable projects facing contractual obligations for near-term delivery. What I think is critically important is that we align our short-term response with our long-term goals. Here, IRENA's flagship Global Renewable Outlook provides us with a compass. While our immediate priority must be, of course, remain to save the lives and livelihoods, we must not forget the threat posed by climate change. The outlook shows how to decarbonize the energy sector while highlighting capital-intensive area of investments that will be very attractive reason for stimulus funding, such as infrastructure to enable increased deployment in all end-use sectors. Our analysis also takes a very broad approach, taking into account the socio-economic footprint of the energy transition. It finds that going through those pathways will bring to us with more jobs. We estimate 42 million jobs in renewable energy sector in 2050, 21 million for energy efficiency, 15 for grid flexibility. There are several policy and action areas government should focus on. First, COVID provides government and investors with an opportunity to speed up the transition. The energy transition should be central to government stimulus packages. Public finance, including subsidies, must be shifted away from fossil fuel and used strategically to leverage financing for green infrastructure. We cannot bail out the past. Finance and fiscal policies need to be aligned and used in line with our long-term goals. I think it is also essential that governments reaffirm their commitment to renewables through targets and indices. They should also incentivize renewables and commit to public investment in enabling environmental for renewables. Third, the crisis has unveiled disruption in supply chains and resulted in massive job loss. So it is important for governments to consider how to leverage local capacity to create domestic value to increase GDP and create jobs. Finally, and very important, we must invest in people. Right now, we need to ensure social protection of workers. But as we respond to this crisis, we must also focus on education and reskilling to create new opportunities and to build the labor market needed for a sustainable energy system. These are just broad areas. We need to make sure we target our response to the unique needs of different countries and harness the full range of available solutions. For instance, decentralized renewables are a proven approach for remote health care in energy-poor communities, while enabling economic activity. India is a leader on innovative solutions in the off-grid renewable space. Let me conclude by saying the recovery is a global issue. We have to be able to interconnect the short term with the medium and long term perspective. We are coming out in the next 3 weeks with a report trying to link our global renewable outlook to the defining of a plan for the stimulus package. It is not just about solidarity. It is our common interest to ensure that the energy transition underpins global resilience. Effective international cooperation will be key to this. And I would like to thank Isa for convening this timely meeting today, for us to explore together how we can recover better and build a world that is more resilient and leaves no one behind. Arena is ready to work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director General Camera. Very clear. This is has to be designed in the local context. Renewable energy is job rich. So once we get through this sort of process of stabilization and stopping those jobs hemorrhaging in the first place, there is lots more to be created. And it would appear that investors are hanging in with the renewable energy sector because it is such an important part of the transition, in contrast to investor appetite for some other parts of the energy system. So now, and Director General Camera talked about both grid-connected renewable energy, and he talked also about the fact that decentralized renewables will be important. And so now it's my distinct honor to be able to pass the floor to Her Royal Highness Princess Abhijigma, a very important voice, advocate, and practitioner, somebody who walks the talk, and is now the special envoy of the President of Burkina Faso for resource mobilization for SDGs and climate change. She has been one of the strongest advocates for SDG 7 since before it was conceptualized. And so the floor is yours, Your Royal Highness. Okay, so we're going to pivot now, which is what all good webinars do, and we'll come back to the Princess when she is when she's online. I'm going to go straight now to one of the people of the moment. The UK government announced last week, together with Italy, that it would be hosting a COP26. Not in November of this year, but in fact in November of 2021, in response to the extraordinary dislocation from COVID-19. And so John Merton is one of the envoys for COP26, playing the extraordinary role as the UK sent out their diplomats around the world to galvanise greater ambition and action. So Dr. John Merton, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Rachel. I just want to check that viewers can actually see the speakers on the screen, because so far I've only been able to see the holding slide. Can we just check that, please?
Yeah, I think that's an issue which is being worked out. So we'll try and fix that while you're talking. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you very much for inviting me along today, and we're so sorry that we're meeting like this virtually because of COVID-19, and I hope that everyone around the world will keep safe during this period. In the UK, we're beginning to reopen, but obviously with nervousness about the impact of COVID on our societies. And a part of that is the impact of COVID upon renewable energy. For that, I'm very optimistic. I think it was Fatih Birol who recently said that COVID-19 was sending us a postcard from the future in terms of what our energy mix will look like in years to come. And if I look now on my computer, I can look at the UK national grid live electricity generation, and I see 75% of our power in the UK at the moment is coming from zero carbon sources, and 28% is coming from solar power. And for those of you who like to think of the UK as a rainy, windy island and know that we produce a lot of wind power, the fact that we're now producing nearly a third of our power from solar power on a sunny day is something special. And in the UK now, we've used no coal for electricity generation for 52 days, which is a record. And you think back just 8 short years ago, coal was 40% of our power mix. So we really are seeing what the future looks like in the UK, and hopefully domestically we'll work towards that in the years to come. Some have been concerned that lower fossil fuel prices will undermine the growth of solar and other renewable energies around the world. We're doing a lot of analysis on that, and there are a range of voices, but I think for the minute I'm not unduly concerned. If the fall in fossil fuel prices that we're seeing now are temporary as a result of a short, sharp cut in energy demand due to COVID-19, then as they go back up, renewables will renew their march and become increasingly competitive as solar prices fall. I think they're falling in the region of 18% a year at the moment, solar prices. So by the time we get to COP26 in November 2021, we might see solar prices a quarter lower than they are today. And by 2027, the 80th anniversary of Indian independence, we might expect solar prices to be in the region of a quarter of what they are today, and oil and gas won't be able to compete with that, especially when you consider the drop in battery technology and the drop in battery prices, and how that will enable solar to be united with battery technology and outcompete gas in many markets in the world. Conversely, if the fall in fossil fuel prices are more permanent as a result of perhaps a slower recovery from COVID-19, then we'll discover that much global oil production is not sustainable. And a huge percent, even now, if we look at the figures, a huge percentage of world oil production is enduring production costs that are above the cost of oil globally. And essentially, businesses are running cash negative. And as we go into an inevitable economic slowdown as a result of COVID-19, businesses that are running cash negative will find it very difficult to get new financing from banks. And what we'll see undoubtedly is a change in the geography of oil production, as oil production will be increasingly dominated by a number of lower cost producers. And that will produce new political and diplomatic stimuluses for many countries that have previously produced oil and gas of their own to shift to renewables. Even if you don't believe in climate change and you don't think you should be doing anything to tackle climate change, why wouldn't you shift to a cheaper form of energy over which you had more control, rather than be dependent on a smaller number of oil producers around the world? Ultimately, however, I think it's the accountants who will spell the end of fossil fuels in the post-COVID-19 era. As more and more countries like the UK and the EU reflect their Paris Agreement pledges by adopting legally binding net zero targets, this sends really strong messages to bankers and financiers and oil and gas executives about future prices. And oil firms won't be able to, in the future, publish accounts with non-Paris compliant assumptions about what oil prices will be in the future. And once those new assumptions are marked into company accounts, it will make raising funds for future fossil fuel developments even harder than it is now. We must ensure that our public policy doesn't undermine these evolving trends. We will be under a lot of pressure to grow our economies back after COVID-19. And if in a mistaken dash for growth, we invest in brown technology or in old carbon heavy technology, the decisions we make will lay the foundation for lower growth and lock in polluting emissions and high energy costs for decades. Conversely, if we take the time to make sure that we invest in green, then we will enjoy higher growth and lower carbon emissions. Fortunately, I think the trend is clear. In Europe and the UK, the green economy is growing much faster than the old fossil fuel economy. And therefore, replacing lost economic growth from COVID means accelerating towards that greener future. And my Prime Minister last week at the United Nations Financing for Development event spoke of the importance of building back better and building a clean and resilient recovery from COVID-19. We've heard the President of the EU Commission speak about Europe's new Green Deal, and China itself talks heavily about ecological civilization. And of course, we can't discuss a green resilient recovery without mentioning India, which has a defining role to play. And we've been following the incredible success that India has enjoyed with its new solar auctions, even during a lockdown, where it's achieving lower prices in 2020 during lockdown than it achieved in 2019. And its policy innovation, including the must-run order to renewable energy companies. So there's been lots of really exciting development in that sphere. And so I think we're hopefully on the brink of a change. And I'm originally a development economist, and we will look back on this period as the stimulus to a new growth in renewable energy, particularly solar. And that we'll look back and see, particularly in poorer countries, and I spent a lot of my career in Africa, that this period was the trigger point for the transition to an off-grid solar-powered economy, in the same way as we saw in the 90s and the early part of the 21st century, the shift from landlines to mobile telephony. We'll see the same shift to off-grid and solar energy in the future. And we hope that we can crystallize a lot of that and showcase that to the world at COP26 next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that healthy injection of optimism, which would seem to be borne out now by some of the trends that we're seeing accelerating through COVID. Of course, incumbency and inertia were the enemies of the transition before COVID, and maybe COVID is the thing to unpick both of those things. I think it's also important to note, where transparency and regulation, and as you said, the accountants are going to have the key to the transition, and also think about the extraordinary efforts we have to bring in solidarity as the international community, especially to those countries whose state-owned financial system is holding most of the carbon assets. And so as they are bailed out by the IMF and others, to make sure that public money isn't reinforcing their incumbency and is allowing them to make the transition as well. So now I understand that we have been joined by Sri Suresh Prabhu, who was eloquently introduced earlier. He's been able to join us now. He is, of course, Prime Minister Modi's Sherpa. Yes?
No, Mr. Indusekhar Chakrabarty, Vice Minister, will speak now.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Well, maybe you'd like to introduce him, Director General Tripathi.
Well, I welcome the Vice Minister. He's the Secretary. I told there are some technical issues, so he couldn't join. I welcome him to give the message on behalf of the Minister, Honorable R.K. Singh, the Honorable Minister for Power and Renewable Energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Ms. Rachel Kite, moderator for the webinar, distinguished participants, and the Director General, International Solar Alliance. I speak on behalf of the President of the International Solar Alliance, Honorable Minister Mr. R.K. Singh, who is unable to participate because of some other important engagements. COVID-19 has made a profound impact on global trade and economy. Solar energy is no exception. Disrupted supply chains have strained project development timelines in this area. The impact due to delayed delivery of project components and unavailability of workforce has led to great uncertainties regarding the future of most solar projects. The International Solar Alliance's study on the impact of COVID-19 on the solar industry is a timely one. It concludes that the crisis has refocused attention of governments and policymakers to fight climate change and localize energy supply, and that these priorities play to solar technology's advantage. This is indeed a good outcome of an otherwise terrible crisis. The Government of India was quick to respond to the situation, particularly in regard to the renewable energy sector. The operation of renewable energy generation plants has been declared as an essential service in order to ensure uninterrupted supply of electricity. The policy for granting extension of time for various renewable energy projects treating the lockdown period as force majeure is already in place. Mainstreaming renewables is a key component of India's development vision 2030 and also a national priority. Over the course of last 6 years, excluding large hydro, we have increased our renewable energy installed capacity 2.5 times. Our government has drawn a roadmap for accelerated renewable energy deployment and augmenting grid capacity to absorb the increased renewable energy generation. India has taken the first steps toward realizing One Sun, One World, One Grid project. This has the potential for sharing renewable energy across international borders and balancing the interconnected grid through renewable energy sources alone. The International Solar Alliance's role will be critical to increasing generation and consumption of solar energy in future. We are sure that the organization will succeed in achieving this goal. Indeed, the initial work done by the organization shows great promise. It is the duty of all member countries to strengthen and nurture the International Solar Alliance. Let me end by complimenting the ISA Secretariat for organizing the webinar. I wish this event all success. Thank you.
Your Excellency Vice Minister, thank you so much for those words, and thank you for your stewardship and leadership at this critical time. I'm going to now pivot from John Merton, who is the envoy for COP26. India, as he said, would play an extraordinarily important role over the next 18 months, to Selwyn Hart, who is currently the Special Advisor to the Secretary General, the United Nations Secretary General on Climate Action, and Assistant Secretary General for the Climate Action Team. He is, of course, well known within the climate world for his many, many years as a climate negotiator, speaking powerfully for the most vulnerable, coming from his home state of Barbados. Selwyn, the floor is yours. Please give us an overview from the 38th floor in New York.
Thank you, Rachel. And you're more familiar than others with what happens on the 38th floor. But I just wish to thank you and the other distinguished colleagues, the Director General of the International Solar Alliance, our colleagues from the UK, from Irina, and all of the other colleagues that are participating in this call. And I can't miss this opportunity to congratulate India for its plans to take forward the International Solar Alliance in the form of One Sun, One World, One Grid, as well as its plans to create a World Solar Bank to mobilize 1 trillion of investments in solar projects over the coming decades. This is the type of leadership that we need at this moment. As you outlined in your report, the COVID-19 crisis continues to have a devastating impact around the world. And many countries right now are focused rightly on saving lives and livelihoods. However, there will be, and it has already started, countries have started to pivot and to think about how to recover, but how to recover better. And last week, the Secretary General, along with the Prime Ministers of Canada and Jamaica, held a high-level event on financing for development in the COVID era and beyond. And it identified 6 areas of work focused primarily on crisis response, but also Area 6, Recover Better, focuses on how countries and the international community can recover better from the crisis. From day one, the Secretary General has insisted that the recovery from the COVID crisis must follow the blueprint of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. And there is a growing coalition of countries, of real economy actors, of civil society, not only supporting the call for a better recovery, a green recovery, an inclusive recovery, but who have already started to identify some of the key elements, country-specific, and as Rachel said, localized elements that could be part of green recovery and green stimulus packages. And a green recovery will be different for India, as it will be different for the UK, as it will be for Barbados. In support of this effort, the Secretary General has identified these 6 climate positive actions, 6 climate positive actions that countries should take into account when designing their green recovery packages. He's asked them that as they recover from the COVID crisis, they need to deliver new and green jobs and businesses through a green transition. Secondly, he's asked that when taxpayer dollars are being used to bail out businesses, these bailout packages should be tied to companies committed to become Paris Agreement aligned. Secondly, he's called for an end to fossil fuel subsidies and for putting a price on carbon pollution. Third, he's asked for resilience, the just transition, and the just and the fair transition to be at the heart of the recovery. Fifth, he's asked for climate risks and opportunities to be taken into account in all financial and policy decisions. And Mark Carney, the Secretary General's special envoy, he is leading the Secretary General's effort in this regard. And fifth, and equally importantly, he's asked that as we recover from the crisis, we need to do it together. He's asking us to double down on international cooperation and solidarity. And this is where an organization or an entity like the International Solar Alliance is absolutely critical for building and mobilizing international solidarity and cooperation around a green recovery. So let me outline sort of 3 areas of action that I wish to propose for you that you incorporate in your work. First, during this emergency response phase, as countries fight the pandemic, access to electricity and water for healthcare facilities must be priority number 1. And I know we've been speaking to your team on how the International Solar Alliance can support this. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, close to 40,000 healthcare facilities lack access to affordable and reliable energy services. And we think that this is an area where the International Solar Alliance can make a decidable difference. Second, we need leaders. We need countries to lead in this recovery phase. India is uniquely placed to serve as a model and a front runner in the green recovery phase. It is especially impressive, as Ambassador Merchant stated earlier, that even in the midst of the lockdown, you were able to successfully advance your solar auction in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. India is uniquely positioned to serve as a role model and a leader within the G20 and for other developing countries. The third area is India's leadership in the developing world. I believe that the G20 countries generally have the means and capacity to put in place green recovery plans and strategies. However, there are about 150 other countries, developing countries, who generally lack the means and the capacity to design and implement green recovery packages. South-South cooperation will be absolutely crucial in ensuring that these countries are able to translate what I believe is very strong political will. I know within Africa and among the islands, we heard many leaders last week at the Secretary General's event express a strong desire to recover in a green manner with renewable energy at the center of their recovery plans and strategies. It will be absolutely essential for India and the International Solar Alliance to help and support these countries to turn this political will into concrete action. Finally, one of my favorite cricketing heroes is Sachin Tendulkar. And he said, if destiny throws a stone at you, don't let it become a millstone. Make it into a milestone. I believe that we have a unique opportunity to turn this crisis, this stone, into a milestone, a great opportunity for the world to provide an inclusive, resilient, and sustainable future for all. I thank you, Rachel.
Selwyn, thank you so much, and thank you for that fighting talk in quoting Tendulkar at the end there. I think if anybody threw a stone at him, he'd hit it for 6. But of course, I come from the UK where we've been beaten a few times. But ISA, I think the Secretary General's team have laid down some challenges for you there, which I know you are equal to. As Selwyn said, the Secretary General has been very clear. Recovery has to be clean, it has to be green, it has to be safe, and it has to be fair. And so it makes a lot of sense now to move to Ms. Carmen Hagenaz, who is the Director General of the Inclusive Green Growth Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands. So a critical part of the EU that came out with an ambitious package for recovery and for incorporating the Green New Deal in that recovery. And of course, the Netherlands itself playing a leading role in SDGs and in climate action. So the floor is yours, please, Carmen. Okay, so I think we're having a little technical difficulty as some of the speakers are having problems being able to join us and to be actually able to speak. Can I confirm with the organisers whether or not the Princess is joined? No. So I think we're there, but we can't hear from them. So while we fix that, then let's go to Dr. Raj Shah, who is the president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Now, Raj, you've been intimately involved in the renewable energy, the push for renewable energy way back to your days at USAID. And then while the Rockefeller Foundation has got a long and proud history of investing along with partners in all kinds of different business models in the renewable energy space, you've doubled down on that coming in as the president. And recently you announced a huge joint venture with Tata Power with huge ambitions around scaling microgrid, mini-grid investment. So I think here we are at a point where we're looking at a global recessionary environment. We're looking at the need to use this moment to spur renewable energy even further. We've seen lots of evidence from Irina with more to come and others that investors are hanging in there with the renewable energy sector. So what are the lessons of scale that you've learned so far, and how do you think that can inform the use of this COVID crisis as an opportunity for solar to play an even bigger part of the future? Over to you, Raj.
Dr. Shah, perhaps we might ask you to please quickly turn on your microphone. Thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent.
It's lovely to
Okay,
see
sorry.
you. Thank you.
My apologies. I just wanted to say thank you, Rachel, for having me and for bringing together this extraordinary group of leaders who do, in fact, see this crisis clearly for what it is, and also recognize that now is our moment to make major commitments to green infrastructure for the purpose of creating a recovery pathway and a safer and more protected and more inclusive future global economy. And in that spirit, I would make just a few points. The first is that this remains a pandemic health threat that is bigger, more severe, and will likely have a longer tail than most people still realize. And the consequence of that is a deeper and longer lasting economic recession, depression, or in some cases worse. The consequence of that is that the scale of the crisis response, including here in the United States of America, where I am, where we've had $4 trillion of capital markets liquidity provided by the Federal Reserve and $3 trillion of fiscal action, it is not enough to actually create jobs and keep tens of millions of people employed. And as a result, we're facing the largest unemployment crisis since the Great Depression. To do something about that, we will need recovery packages that are acted on quickly, that are much, much larger than what any nation yet has put in place, and that fundamentally leverage the reality that green infrastructure and energy infrastructure in particular can be a driver of job creation and economic inclusion for the long run. We know that because our Tata Power partnership in India between Rockefeller and Tata is in fact $1 billion public-private initiative that seeks to build 10,000 rural mini grids, providing productive power to more than 100,000 rural enterprises and more than 400,000 farms, reaching ultimately nearly 25 million Indians. And what we've learned from that activity is that you can in fact design distributed renewable energy, off-grid energy solutions for communities around the country, in India, and frankly around the world, including in Africa, Puerto Rico, Myanmar, many other geographies where the Rockefeller Foundation is active. And more than 80% of the power consumed is consumed by small businesses that are trying to create jobs. And so this is not just an effort to improve our long-term climate sustainability, which it does. It is primarily an effort to help support inclusive small and medium enterprise job creation, which is desperately needed in India and around the world. And so building on the excellent comments of others, Upendra Tripathi, Sri Suresh Prabhu, DG Camera, and John Merton, just to name a few, we really believe now is the moment for a very large-scale global energy access effort that uses these new technologies to create both a climate safe economy and an inclusive one. And we are proud of the fact that our partners in India have proposed the Solar Bank and other major global efforts. But I worry some that COP21 is too far into the future and that we need to make actions happen right now in order to put in place the types of efforts that will both create jobs and protect our climate in the future. Thank you, Rachel.
No, thank you. And thank you, Raj. Yes, COP21, 18 months away, is not the moment that everybody should be hanging their announcements on, right? I think you're absolutely right that there is, and I think this is actually the work of John and others, is to spur that action so that we don't lose this year. I mean, this is the year where countries need to be coming with their plans for ambition. It's not tied to the COP, it's tied to the calendar. So it is 2020. And Patricia Espinosa was very clear about that this morning at the beginning of the June Momentum Days. So it is by December 2020 that countries need to come with those plans for ambition. And those plans for ambition are going to have to be embedded in recovery plans. And as you said, a big push for energy access would be one of the surest ways to build resilience to all kinds of crises, including a pandemic, and brings us back to the points that have been made around access to electricity when it comes to healthcare. So we seem to be having a couple of technical problems, which mean that a couple of the speakers can't actually be heard. So if everybody will bear with me, I am going to check whether or not Riccardo Politi is with us and whether he can speak. Riccardo, are you there? Okay, so while we're trying to figure this out, I know that my former colleague Glenn Pierce is with us. Glenn Pierce Oros is the Director of International Relations and Special Projects for Sustainable Energy for All. And I know you're working hard on a piece of work to look at how to recover better, looking in particular, I think, at distributed renewable energy. But why don't we come to you while we figure out how to be able to hear from some of our other speakers. Glenn, it's good to see you.
Great to see you, Rachel, and thank you very much, DG Tripathi, for including Sustainable Energy for All in this very important discussion. And I, while agreeing with all of the distinguished panelists, I'm wondering if there's a more robust way of looking at the challenges that we have in front of us, considering that energy and sustainable energy needs to be pivoted as the engine room of the economy, but also as importantly, sustainable energy is an important part of the engine room to balance the inequality that keeps becoming deeper. And this, if there's one thing that the COVID-19 crisis has demonstrated, is this inequality that persists across different regions, but also within many of the countries. And so part of what our role should be is to make sure, as Raj Shah just said a few moments ago, and others, that the response is both to address access to energy, but also the issue of inequality across many different countries. We know that the SDG 7 tracking report was just released a few days ago, and it tells us in flashing red lights that we are off track for meeting the Sustainable Development Goal number 7 by 2030. And why is this important? This is crucially important because a great deal of those 789 million people who still do not have access to electricity are found in 17 countries in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. And if we think about what the solutions are in sub-Saharan Africa, we cannot ignore the off-grid solutions. On-grid, very important. Off-grid, as important and as necessary in the way we're able to address this particular inequality. And when we think of off-grid, we certainly think about what are some of the renewable energy solutions. What are some of the solar-powered solutions? And this is where we do need to recognize the leadership that India has made and how the Indian approach to rapid electrification can be useful for some of the top countries now that have the largest deficits. Nigeria, with 85 million people still lacking access to electricity. Ethiopia, with about 60 million. DRC, with about 65 million people. These types of approaches that India has done and to rapidly reach over 200 million people in the past 10 years, 8 years, is extremely important as evidence and as lessons for others. I would like to share, Rachel, a couple of data points to underscore the urgency of what's happening in the off-grid sector. And this comes from a survey that SE4All conducted now almost a month and a half ago. And this was a survey that we did of 82 different off-grid companies, both mini-grid and solar home systems, from a dozen countries, mostly Africa, but also included India and Indonesia. And this small sample represents almost 2 million connections. And so we were interested in being able to raise the issue of what's happening in the off-grid market. We were able to partner with Smart Power India, Gogla, AMDA as well, in terms of some of the additional data. And the 4 key concerns that we found after looking at the situation post-COVID-19 crisis in the off-grid space is that there was definitely first a concern for securing people and securing workers, securing customers. But immediately following that, there was a concern about securing cash. And mini-grid sectors is calculating that it may lose up to 40% of its revenue as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. Solar home systems, more than 25% of their revenue. Third of the 4 concerns is securing operations. And this goes to a very important point, which the Vice Minister mentioned, which was India designating renewable energy as an essential industry. Let's expand that and make sure it's also the off-grid sector, which is part of that designation of being an essential industry. So securing operations is the third key element or third key concern. And the companies that we were able to survey estimate, here's the urgency part, estimate they only have 2 months left of operational expenditures available. 2 months, not a lot. And fourth, of course, securing growth. How do we grow this sector moving forward? My final point, Rachel and esteemed colleagues, is certainly that we have a chance to recover better with sustainable energy for all. We have a chance to pivot and start talking about energy for development and energy to recover better, energy to balance inequalities. And we need to be supportive of those countries immediately as they're putting together their stimulus packages. Thanks very much, Rachel.
Glenn, thank you very much. And I think the survey, however much it is a sample, is really important because, once the company is lost, then building a new company is very difficult. So keeping these companies operating so that they can be part of a much more robust and energetic distributed sector going forward is going to be critical. And I hope that India, as well as others, can find a way in the discussions with the international financial institutions, with the development finance agencies, and with their own bilateral sort of economic and trade engagement, make sure that we don't let many in the distributed energy sector fall through the fingers of the COVID crisis before we get to the recovery. So I will leave it right there. But so we're still trying to connect a couple of people who are with us, but we can't see them and we can't hear them. I just want to double back to Francesco, if I may. Not trying to put you on the spot, but in the work that you do to analyze investment in the renewable energy sector, I think in your reporting and in others, we've seen that investors investment in renewable energy is holding up better than other parts of the energy mix. And of course, as John Merton pointed out, there's very sensible reasons for that. But how do you think we can stimulate even more investment flowing into the renewable energy sector, in particular in markets where investment in infrastructure has been lagging behind where it needed to be anyway? Are there sort of I think the OECD called for a Marshall Plan, and and lots of other plans all at the same time. I mean, what is there a need for a sort of extraordinary outside of the box push in order to secure the kind of energy access that Raj Shah talked about? And from your perspective, what would you want to see from the from this international cooperation that we're looking for and perhaps not quite getting at the moment?
So concerning the first of your question, you know, I'm used to say that we don't need to discuss about what could be the right choices to make in this period. We have just to avoid to make the wrong choices. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, the trends are very clear. The installed capacity of renewable are outpacing systematically each year the traditional one, and the gap between renewables and the other are becoming larger year by year. The cost, we will see in a report tomorrow that also this year we will have a 2-digit decrease in the cost of renewables. So the pandemic cannot stop this process. The pandemic will emphasize this process. And what is important to do is that looking to the future, naturally we are still not in line with the Paris Agreement. This tragedy gives us the opportunity to do things faster. And my point of view, what you say concerning infrastructure is very important, because you know, all our system is based on idea of centralized energy system with oil, gas, and coal be the main fuel to be used. We have to work for a system that should be decentralized and give the possibility to renewables to be in the market and to be better connected to the grid. So if we give the sign very clearly with infrastructure that you want to make grids more flexible, more open to renewable, better interconnected, this public money will provoke a leverage of private money that I think will change the path and making this acceleration we need for being in line with the reduction of the 70% of CO2 emission in 2050. So it's very important that we give the right signal to the market. If I have room to say something else, Rachel, on this, you think I can have another minute?
No, absolutely, please do.
Yeah, because you know, this crisis is different than the last one we had in 2008, because this is an healthy crisis that through the lockdown has been to the lowering the demand and become an economic crisis with unemployment and all the rest. But the financial aspect is still, the financial sector is still in acceptable good health. So we have to be very careful responding to the pandemic, don't to bring the crisis into the financial system, but profit of the liquidity that we have in the market to go and build in the future. So investment that can give a return, enlarge the fiscal space in the country, and make possible to start again an accelerating path of decreasing the CO2 emission and be in line with the Paris Agreement.
Rachel, sorry to interrupt. The princess has sent a message that she has joined. So could you make an announcement? Maybe she's able to hear. There is some technical problem, so she can't see you.
Yes, certainly. Let's open the floor.
Just announce if she is able to speak.
Yes. So, Princess, can you if you can hear me, you can speak now. Yeah, I think a couple of people have joined as guests, which means that their microphones won't work, and there's some problem with them enrolling as speakers. So I think just to go back to what you were saying, Francesco. So I think this point that it is not yet a financial crisis, although there are clearly risks present in part of the global economy that could mean that it becomes a financial crisis is very important. And I think, in the developed world, this was a virus which has begotten an economic crisis, which may beget a financial crisis. In part of the developing world, it was a financial crisis as capital was repatriated, as supply chains and trade slowed down, leading to an economic crisis, and now leading to now the virus is perhaps catching up as well, although the path of the virus and its impacts seem to be different in different countries. So, I think that the differential impact around the world is something which speaks to this need to sort of localize responses economically. But at the core of this is the resilience of the energy sector and the affordability, the reliability of that energy sector, and the fact that this is a respiratory crisis, and so to build back an energy system so that it isn't cleaner would seem to be dangerous. Not only from the sort of perspective of zero net emissions, but also because of the air that we want to be able to breathe in the growing towns and cities of the developing world. Can I come back to you, Raj, because we see there's a hesitancy, I think would be an appropriate way to describe it, the international governmental cooperation and the international leadership that the Secretary General is asking for, as Selwyn reinforced. You're sitting, you've been on the government side, you're sitting in charge of one of the most influential philanthropies in the world. How can the sort of soft money or the money that will go to places that others won't go, together with the private sector, how can it communicate from government what it needs from government in order to really go to scale? Or do you not need government?
Well, Rachel, thank you. I think you absolutely need government, and you need public-private partnership. What we need is something on the order of the Green Revolution for food and agriculture that took place perhaps 40 or 50 years ago. We have private enterprises like Tata Power and so many others in India and elsewhere around the world, creating real innovations in their capacity to bring renewable energy, particularly distributed renewable energy, to customers in an ever more so efficient manner, and to be a real part of the economic future. Those enterprises and the technologies they represent, everything from artificial intelligence to manage battery and energy management systems, smart meters and remote mobile payments systems, low-cost grid infrastructure that allows for extension and connectivity, and new energy storage technologies, particularly on the back of the electric vehicle market and lithium-ion batteries. All of this can transform what's possible. Private companies, private philanthropies can put real capital into demonstrating that transformational capacity. But what we really need is to step back and recognize this crisis is a jobs crisis. It's coupled with some structural trends. I think 28 million Indians have migrated from urban to rural communities, and that's likely to be an underestimate. It's coupled with the structural trend of the reality that everywhere in the world, small and medium enterprises, which are the labor sink for most economies, have been hit hardest relative to large firms and in particular digital platforms. And so the reality is we need a much bigger plan, and we need it now. And the upcoming General Assembly in September, the World Bank IMF meetings in October, major efforts by the BRIC nations, led in part by India's leadership, but inclusive of China and others in the emerging world, and some degree of renewed U.S. Participation are going to be necessary to put a multi-trillion-dollar green infrastructure package in place in dozens of economies around the world that desperately need it as a job-creating mechanism to avert further catastrophe given the COVID crisis. And we need to act with a real sense of urgency. The Rockefeller Foundation is all in on this. Anyone who is listening here and would like to follow up with us and our partners to help advance this concept, we welcome your engagement. And we follow the lead of so many talented, UN leaders and agencies that have come out with big announcements already. We just think it needs to be more coordinated, much larger and much faster, and much more embracing of some of the technology solutions that have come out of the private sector in the last 6 to 8 years.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a moment that requires a sort of an outsized response, galvanized with a sense of urgency, which I think everybody's struggling with at the moment, and obviously huge opportunities to use international economic cooperation to steady the ship, but also to divert resources to where they're really needed, and then to deal with the real structural problems that come on the back of increased indebtedness, potentially necessary in order to fuel the economy, but some very interesting large-scale international macroeconomic questions that have to be answered, which perhaps is the right moment for me then to call upon Sri Suresh Prabhu, who needs very little introduction in the world of the International Solar Alliance, because he's been one of the gurus of the alliance, and is now the Prime Minister Modi's Sherpa to the G7 and the G20. So, sir, before you joined us, your leadership role and the role of the Prime Minister have been invoked many times by all speakers at a moment of critical importance for the continued speed of growth of the renewable energy sector worldwide. And so perhaps you could give us your thoughts about how India is ready to seize the mantle of leadership.
Okay, so thank you very much, and let me take this opportunity to congratulate the International Solar Alliance and also thank them for bringing not just solar energy into focus, but as you correctly mentioned, the renewable energy into focus. The changing world's energy mix is very critical for us to combat with climate change. And now all of us are struggling to find out what's the real cause behind this pandemic, which has forced all of us to speak through this medium of online communication. I am sure one day we'll come to the conclusion that one of the reasons why we are facing this problem is loss of biodiversity. That's why the animal-man conflict is becoming more visible and more profound, and therefore the animal-borne diseases and those problems are actually now getting into the human beings. So the virus, which everybody says could be coming from the animal to the man, may be one of the reasons why the biodiversity is lost. And why the biodiversity is lost? One of the reasons, if not the only reason, is climate change. And therefore, climate change essentially cannot be reversed, cannot be addressed, forget reverse, cannot be addressed unless we change the energy mix. And changing energy mix should be in such a manner that will not, the new energy that will bring in will not cause greenhouse gas emission. And therefore, renewable energy seems to be the only answer for the world. And in that renewable energy basket, solar energy will actually be the primary source of energy in the next few years' time. Because sun is always there, irrespective of whatever happens. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't see it. And some part of the world, it is because of the clouds covering it, you don't feel their presence, but sun is always there. Therefore, solar energy is the only source of energy which will provide stable, reliable, clean, and climate-proof energy to the whole world and to the entire human beings. Now, to make that happen, we needed an alliance like ISA, International Solar Alliance, because if all the world community commits to make use of solar energy, automatically it will bring new technologies, because the markets will get a signal that there is a demand for it. So automatically more investment will go into research and development. And once the scaling up happens, the prices will also come down, which will again become more affordable than what it is today. So International Solar Alliance provides a necessary framework for bringing in scalable and more use of solar energy in the lives of people in the years to come. So Prime Minister Modi has been the champion of this cause ever since he was the Chief Minister of a state, but he had to become finally the Prime Minister of India to actually implement this idea. And we are very distinguished member of our civil service, Mr. Upendra Tripathi, who is the Secretary General and driving it. So we feel very strongly that we must bring in solar energy as a preferred source of energy for people of the world. Now, for that, many things must happen. One, though the prices have crashed considerably in the last few years' time, and now more or less comparable, and sometimes it is even cheaper than the fossil fuel prices, but even then, there's a tremendous scope for reduction of the prices. For that, we must increase the efficiency of solar photovoltaic panels. It must go, say 25%, 30% over a period of time. So we must invest money into research and development of that. Number two, we must bring in more solar thermal, concentrated solar power of a larger quantity into the solar stream. Number three, we must invest more into getting storages. Now, these are all accepted facts now, but we must make that effort to make it happen. We must also bring in, as you correctly pointed out, madam, getting more renewables means we must get hybrid systems. We must try to get different kinds of renewable sources working together to provide holistic solution to this. So this again must happen. India stands strongly committed to do this, and therefore under leadership of our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, we have got 100,000 megawatts of commitment for solar energy. Another 70,000 megawatts of commitment for wind energy. And as you know, India gets 300 days of sunshine. So we can actually generate far more solar energy with new technologies I just mentioned coming into play. And we also have 7,600 kilometers of coastline. So we can bring in not only the land-based solar system, but also offshore. So onshore and offshore both together can generate huge energy for the world. And as you know, India has been now said to be, in the incremental use of energy, India is one of the largest users of energy. So if India changes energy mix, it is going to have a profound impact on the entire energy demand for the world, the kind of demand that will come in. So this is what we need to do. I can see clearly a shift in that direction. Of course, the oil price is coming down. Both these are different kind of a challenge, but I'm sure people will realize that affordability is one, but also long-term energy security will come from the source which is locally available to you, like country like India, which imports 70% of oil, but also concern for your own safety, public health, and the concern for climate change, which is going to destroy economies of a larger scale than COVID has done. And therefore, understanding the consequences of that adverse effect of using the fossil fuel energy on a larger scale, I think will make people understand that this has to be the only source of energy that is going to sustain the human being for the long, long time to come, probably forever. And therefore, ISA will play a very key role into doing that. Already a number of countries have joined this very important alliance. I think more should join in because this is the combined interest of all of us. And when we talk about the sustainable goals, ISA can actually help achieve the sustainable goals of for the world through changing the energy mix. Again, the kind of distribution network that we can create by creating microgrids can again transform rural economies in a significant way. This will help the farmers in a significant way. It will help people to start micro enterprises because of the microgrid. So the rural employment will also rise substantially, and at a time when public health has become important. So therefore, the thrust on urbanization, thrust on clusters might not be there in future. People may think about going back to the basic of how do you live life in a segregated manner, rather unsegregated manner. And I think this can be a very good boon for changing the economic as well as social dynamics of the world. So I think ISA is a very important platform. Renewable energy is one of the most important things. I have been a champion of renewable energy in my 10 cabinet positions that I held in the past. It is my 6th term in the parliament, and I've always been saying that we must bring in solar energy because sun always shines, and therefore this is very important. In fact, I was telling my friends in the east of India that sun rises to the east and the demand for power is going to be here. So probably why not we marry technology and the demand together and make the world a far better place than what it is today. So I really welcome this initiative. I again reiterate the commitment of India towards this very laudable and noble cause, and we will go whatever it takes to ensure that we make this alliance a successful alliance so that the world benefits. It's a real good public good that we are trying to proliferate through this alliance. So I hope we all join hands, work together, and we need all kinds of stakeholders. We need civil society, we need governments, we need private sector, we also need philanthropic organizations. But importantly, we also need technology partners so that new technologies can come in. And as we have seen, a complete paradigm shift in telecommunication, where the new technologies come in and transform the telecommunication sector. Can we not use the best of these technology platforms, bring them into solar energy, and actually transform the sector in a very significant way? So I think I welcome it, and I really look forward to all countries' participation into this noble endeavor. Thank you very much. All the best to you.
Thank you so much indeed, and thank you for that sort of determination that with backing, with vision, with scale, we can keep the solar sector moving forward rapidly as a solution to the resilience we need through this pandemic crisis, and the resilience we need as we face the already evident climate crisis and waves of climate crisis to come. I think it's been interesting to hear from different perspectives the same kind of determination and optimism. We've heard from those whose job it is to build the sector, from Francesco La Camera at Irina. We've heard from Raj Shah at Rockefeller, who have invested significantly in building this sector over a very long period of time and who are upping their ambition at this particular moment. We heard from Selwyn Hart, who is at the right hand of the Secretary General and trying to fashion the ambition around the climate agenda while the world is as seemingly sort of unstable as it feels for many at the moment. We heard from John Merton, who's got this critical role in helping the UK not only engage in a global diplomatic effort to raise ambition this year into next, when the delayed COP will take place, but also, given the extraordinary heat and dry spell that the UK is going through, and the fact that it can go 52 days without coal, the world looking at the UK to not just ask people to do things, but to show the way and to walk its own talk. And then, of course, I think if we had been able to hear from some of our other speakers, they would have given some nuance around what it means in terms of domestic planning, what it means to really focus on those that we mustn't leave behind, and where the international financial institutions really come out on this. We heard from Glenn Pierce around the sort of the evidence that the distributed renewable energy sector is really hurting at the moment and has to be an urgent priority in recovery efforts, but also in the stabilization efforts that come before recovery. And it's been interesting then to also to look, we stand back and we look at the numbers. Energy demand came down in some parts of the world by more than 25% in the height of the lockdown as a result of the virus. But emissions didn't come down quite as far. And of course, there's always a time lag on this. But it revealed that while we can stop commuting to work, many people have had to be isolated in their own homes around the world. We have embedded in our economy an energy sector which really still needs to go through that deep decarbonisation on an urgent time frame. We talk about zero net growth by 2050, but it's really the next 10 years where the energy transition, which has already started and which is already reaching critical tipping points, needs to take hold. And so this ambition, a solar bank, really extending ISA and the partnerships around solar, is very, very important and borne out by the evidence and the data over the last 2 months. At the same time, we've seen the clean air and perhaps public attitudes in some parts of the world which haven't jumped with so much alacrity onto the the excitement of a renewable energy revolution, perhaps public attitudes are going to change as a result of the more intimate understanding of what resilience means, and the fact that generating power locally as well as through a national grid gives you more resilience, and that perhaps cleaner vehicles, cleaner energy systems give us greater resilience in terms of our human health. So I'm going to hand back now to Director General Tripathi, because we're now at 9:32, and I think we're struggling to connect some of our speakers, and perhaps he can give some thoughts as ISA, and then take it from there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rachel. It has been a real pleasure to have the August gathering, and in fact, I did mention something when my colleagues and me were discussing about webinar. We thought, why don't you change the name? Webinar has been so common, so we took two words, solar plus webinar, and we created a new word called Solinar. It was actually our second Solinar, and we are going to make that a brand for ISA, including we are going to start something called ISA Talk, and we are also planning for a world solar technology summit that we are planning in July, where we are trying to get some heads of the states and heads of the governments. So rightly, all the speakers have highlighted, about the technology issues, about the innovations, about the new type of technologies that is coming in. So today's all the participants have been so kind to us, and we're grateful to them. And we will also see that we involve them in the world, the technology summit we are talking about. And once again, on behalf of my colleagues, I thank everybody, and it has been a great source of strength to have you all together. I'm also equally thankful to the audience. I mean, they came in large numbers, and we must thank the help from the communication being from the Cabinet Secretariat of the UK government, who are helping us in some aspects of communication. And I thank my director Fiona and Cecile, who have put this thing together, and my director Jagjit Sareen from the World Bank, who actually first initiated this idea, because we just got a report and we thought, okay, the report is fine, we write so many reports. But then, you're the one who said, okay, why not, put it in the discussion and all that. And that has been very successful. We're now trying to translate into Spanish and French and, send it around the world. And more importantly, in fact, we'll be putting in the webpage, the Infopedia, the communication platform that we have got, so that people in future can read and send back their comments. Once again, I thank everybody on behalf of Russia. That's it.